Hey there, dear tech fam. This episode, I sat down with Warren Wilansky. He's the founder and president of Plank, a B Corp Certified digital agency that's been building accessible and ethical websites for over 25 years. This episode was really interesting because, we were speaking about media and we talked about a lot about, the different ways his business works as a business. But I think what was really interesting was we got into accessibility. So I don't think that is something that a lot of us think about when we're thinking about developing, whether it be a website or an app. It's not the first thing you think about. It's usually an afterthought. And he talked about how for his company, it's a primary starting point for them. And that thought process was very interesting. And then we talked a lot about, the values and the culture that his company brings. And all leaders hope that they are pioneers of culture. But I think Warren really gets into his thought processes when it comes to some of these things. And it's interesting because he also talks about how his mindset has changed over the years when it comes to certain things like remote. Like he talks about, he was like, I was kicking and screaming when it comes to remote in the beginning. But he's transitioned and he's gone and really looked at the effects of whether being in the office or being remote or whatever it may be. And we get into that. This is on the shorter side in terms of episodes. I really hope to have him on again, really get into the nitty gritties of leadership. But it was a really fun episode. We really got into it and it was a great time. And then he also talks about, he bet on the internet in the 90s, which I think right now in hindsight, a lot of us think, of course, of course he did. But at that time, there was an internet bubble that bursted a couple times since then. I don't know if it was an obvious bet, right? So we talk a lot about that. It was a lot of fun recording. And if you want to know more about Plank or about Warren, you can go to plank.co or warrenwilansky.com. With that, let's get into it. Awesome. All right, Warren. So we're gonna jump right in, and I'm gonna start with an oldie but a goodie. Can you take us back to what originally sparked your interest in design, in media? Where did that start?
So it actually starts with buying an Apple IIe in 1984.
Okay.
I ended up getting an Apple IIe. I was 13 years old, and I just fell in love with computers. I was a hobbyist more than anything. I did some coding, played a lot of games on it, but as a result of that, I fell in love with computers. Go up about a decade from then, and I'm in university. I transferred into a program called Communication Studies. And the intention of it was to try to get into the music business. I wanted to, engineer music. The parts of it also had some sound, had some TV related, film related perspectives and parts to the department. But the one thing I didn't know at the time is they had a stream in the department called multimedia. Crazy old word, but it was called multimedia. And what it was basically learning how to author things like CD-ROMs, do imagery, work with early Photoshop. And all of a sudden, a light went off in my head. It became clear. It's like, oh, wait a second. I can find a way to take my creative side. I played music in bands and things and, kind of played around with design elements and take the computer and match those two things that I was personally passionate about and turn it into something that I could work on. When I finished university, I ended up going out applying for jobs in different places. And the only people that were responding to me were people who had jobs for building websites or building CD-ROMs. So that's kind of how I ended up where I was.
Oh, that's awesome. And if you see me looking around, I have notes on my laptop. I'm writing down notes. So just know that that's what's going on.
Cool.
All right. So then going from that, okay, actually, I'm going to come back to that later because I'm trying to stay in there, but you say stuff and then new things come at me. Because I feel like for sure from where you started to now, media itself has changed dramatically, and what we do on the computers nowadays, so I feel like there's probably a lot of iterations of reevaluating which direction it's going. Were there any bets that you made in terms of like which way you think things are going, and how did those play out?
Well, I'd say the biggest bet I made was doing some design for CD-ROMs, and then around that time was when the web was taking off, and I basically bet on the internet, and I think that was probably the smartest bet to have made. I fell in love with the idea of what web pages were, the idea that you could link to different things, that the internet was something to explore. And I could see, even in its early remnants, with really, really basic styling and basic imagery, I could see from a design perspective where web pages were going to go. I couldn't have seen where they are now, but it was clear at the time. It's like, okay, something is special about this.
And did the bubble bursting do anything, or did that shake your belief in where the internet was going, or?
I mean, the bubble seems to have burst a few times, and
Yeah,
but
very
even
much
going
so.
back, going back then, like at that point when that bubble burst, I'd already started Plank, the company that we're still running. So the company was in existence. We were still in shaky ground. We were only at maybe 2 or 3 people, so we weren't really what I would call like a full-fledged kind of robust company. But we had clients, we had things were going on, and I remember at the time, it wasn't so much that the bubble burst on us. What happened was when the bubble burst, it ended up being like almost a 3-month pause of new work coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So in that 3 months, we weren't running a robust enough company to actually have cash in the bank. So that was the problem we ran into, is no cash for 3 months because we were running paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
We suddenly learned that first business lesson of like, oh, you actually do have to have some cash in the bank to make sure that a company is viable.
It's a good time to learn it early days, right? It's better than to be far into it. And that bubble like burst, and then the next couple of years, internet was back to, crazy numbers. And thanks for introducing Plank, because that was where my next question comes into. Plank. So I was on your culture page, and
Yep.
it's a very robust page, and I will say that, like, it not that many companies don't talk about culture, but I could see in the page that it's not just, you didn't use ChatGPT, right?
No.
It's not just what is culture. It's a very deep page. So can you run me through a little bit about, so again, founding days of Plank, the mission itself, and how that's been able to maybe drive your business maybe differently than if you were just trying to make money or just looking at it dollars and cents?
Yeah, so we started Plank in December 1998, so it's been quite a while at this point. I would say that we always were running it with the same ethos and intentions, but obviously we've changed and we've grown and we've matured. I've grown over 25 years and matured. So I think, that culture page for me is very, very meaningful because I think it represents actually who we really are and not who we're trying to pretend to be. And I think that's the key thing, is that a lot of the things that we share on our website are things and values that we actually live up to. I mean, the only way you'll really know is if you ask our team and find out from them directly if we really do live up to them, but I do believe we live up to them.
And I think you made it. That's exactly the difference, I guess, that I saw when I looked at the page, because you're absolutely right that many companies pick their values as this is what we're aspiring towards, whether or not they're actually working towards it. This is like just what they talk about. Whereas here, exactly what you said, you can see that it came from kind of like the inside, right? Can you talk to me a little bit about how being a B Corp kind of shapes the way that you do business? Because I saw that it was very specific that it said, you run a B Corp. So can you go into that for me a little bit?
For sure. I mean, I'm not sure if you or your listeners know what a B Corp is. It stands for a benefits corporation. Basically, to get certified as a B Corp, you have to go through almost like, you've heard of these like ISO certifications.
Mm-hmm.
What it basically is like you have to go through your documentation, who you are as a company, your values, all these different things. And at the end of it, you almost submit an application in, you're evaluated on it, and then they certify you or not, or you make some corrections and adjustments. The B Corp certification are on specific things such as, social values, how we treat our employees, what kind of clients we work with, our environmental impact. So we had to be judged by those things. And then by doing that, we got certified to be a part of B Corp. And, it was rigorous. It took a long time to do. But again, what it was is we recognized before we went towards the certification of becoming a B Corp, we pretty much already were living those values. We just had to go through recording them, sharing them, and making sure that we could live up to those values and prove that we live up to those values.
Was it like you were running your business and then you saw what a B Corp was and said, hey, oh, we're already doing it, so let's do it anyway? Or was it something that you were aspiring for beforehand? Or where did the idea of, because I feel like, honestly, from what you're expressing, must be a great place to work. Honest to goodness, like that's what it sounds like. And I feel like a lot of companies, a lot of employees would benefit if their companies were more in that direction. So was it chicken or egg? Which came first?
So I think it might have been about 5 years before we did our certification. We talked about it, myself and my partner, Steve, business partner, we talked about it and we thought about it and we looked at the workload for it and we were like, we're never going to get to this. It's just not going to happen. And then we had one employee start working with us. And within the first 2 or 3 months, she said the words to me, I've always wanted to work for a B Corp. So she was on our strategy, business development and marketing team. And we're like, okay, well, do you want to take it on? And she's like, yeah, I want to take it on. So she led our certification. And I remember at the time, When she finished it, we tallied up the hours, and it was about 500 hours of work.
Wow. Wow. That's well. I mean, if you set high goals, you achieve them, right? That's really cool. Okay, so kind of in the same path, but so I've done a bit of snooping on LinkedIn and stuff. So
Okay.
if I'm misquoting, you got to let me know because I'm. But you've said accessibility shouldn't just be about compliance. So tell me about why is accessibility a strategic advantage, and where did that thought process come from? Was it outside of because when I'm assuming that it may have come up when you were applying to be a B Corp, but I feel like it came on independently.
So it fits the whole story of who Plank is. The first time must go back about 10 years or so. We were working on a museum project, and this museum was funded by an organization called the Virtual Museum of Canada. And in their expectations for the site is they expected a certain level of accessibility standards, meeting the W3C schools standards. So that was the first time we were like, oh, well, what is this all about? And again, I don't remember the exact time, but it could go back about 10 years. So I knew of accessibility. We obviously ran into it, but we never kind of tried to meet a certain standard. And that's where I mentioned compliance. So we learned how to meet those standards and reach the standards, and we know how to do those things. But when you come at accessibility from the level of compliance, you kind of only tack it on as a afterthought at the end of the process. Versus we take accessibility through the whole project that we work on. So everybody from our designers thinks about accessibility. Everybody from our developers thinks about it. Our project managers. And as a result, accessibility gets built into our work and it's never anything tacked on. The second thing is, it isn't just about compliance. Accessibility is really about caring and wanting everybody to be included. We want to make sure that that everybody can use a site and have an experience with it. And we also believe that that's not just doing it for the sake of doing good. It's for the sake of actually serving more people. If it's a client and it's a customer of ours and they want to, let's say we do a lot of work with arts and cultural organizations and they want to sell tickets, well, their chance of selling more tickets goes up if they can reach more people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think a lot of things that are compliance oriented, if companies go at it the way that you're talking about from the beginning up, it also makes it just easier to do. Because when it's an afterthought, it costs more money. Like statistically speaking, it's going to cost you. It's always going to be like, this is the project. Oh no, we have to add this on, as opposed to, okay, it's already in there and it wouldn't have cost any different. So let's talk about starting a business and leadership. So let's start with leadership. You've built a remote first company, and has it always been remote first, even before it was cool? Because now it's cool. And what's that like in terms of, right? In the world we live in now, it's not something that is out of the norm, but I feel like it's still keeping culture while being remote is very hard, because people punch in, punch out, and then do whatever they're going to do. And the biggest thing about remote that people knock is culture. And as I can see from your website and from what you're talking about, culture is very strong in your company. So how?
So I'll do my best not to ramble too much about this because it's a topic that I have a lot of opinions on.
No, please.
So if I'm
ramble.
totally honest, I'm the one who had to be dragged kicking and screaming towards remote work. Partly because until the pandemic, I personally took a lot of pride in having a company that was not remote. In other words, there was a place where everybody did work together. There was an office to go to. There was a common culture that everybody kind of came to every day. And looking back now, we were extremely unflexible as far as remote work. And pandemic happens, and as a result, everybody's suddenly remote because they have to be. But what ended up happening is we started to hire people now that we could. We didn't have to be geographically locked. We started to hire people in other places. We started to be more flexible. We started to be, when the pandemic kind of started to ease off, I'm still sitting in our office, but our office is built for about 30 people, and it can vary from anywhere from 3 to 15 people coming in a day. And part of that is that we chose to never kind of impose days. In other words, I know a lot of companies now have moved back to a 3, 4, 5-day in-person expectation. We recognize, okay, well, this might not have been the culture that we originally created, but this is the culture that it got evolved into. And as a result, we are where we are. Now, more on that, and you can, stop me whenever you feel like if I start rambling, because obviously I have thoughts on this.
Please keep going, because this is what everyone, I feel like many people wish that their bosses thought like you. A lot of bosses want to understand your point of view better, because I think, again, remote work is the one thing. It's not one size fits all, and it's something that people really struggle with, and it's not their fault. It is a very hard thing, and it is company by company. So please feel free to ramble, but if I need to stop you, I will, because I know we're being a little conscious of time, so I'll do that as well. But feel
Okay.
free.
So, you know, I'll be honest. There are times every few months that I have a crisis about it, and I'm just kind of like, why are we doing this? Why are we maintaining an office? Why are we so flexible on this? And I usually have the crisis, but you know what that crisis is? That crisis is on me. That's on me wishing things were like they were 5 years ago or 7 years ago, and that's not a realistic expectation. I think for the health of our team and for the people who don't want to travel a long distance, if that makes their life better, then I should be happy about that. Um, you know, on the other hand, what we have to do is we have to be extremely intentional about culture, which is one of the topics you brought up. In that, if we are lazy about culture and just let people clock in and clock out like you recognize it, then that's when we would suddenly stop being the company that we are. So we lean in on our culture, even if our culture now is more on Slack than it is in person. We lean in on making sure that numerous times during the year, we have in-person get-togethers so that we encourage the team to show up, even if it's once or twice a year, so that they have that opportunity to make those personal connections. We encourage people having personal conversations so that they can maintain those connections. And I, for example, I make sure that if I don't see people on a regular basis because they're not in the office, that I, on a quarterly basis or on a monthly basis, take the time to actually chat with every member of the team, so that they have an avenue to talk with me, an avenue to communicate with me. And I never am I a distant leader in that point.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think that's one of the things that you should, just because you're remote, you should know the people outside of the Zoom box, right? Like, which is what, at one point, that's all we had. Tell me about, so you mentioned about hiring people and not having to stay, geographically located. Hiring while keeping your culture in mind, while not being able to really meet the person, especially during COVID, you couldn't have, even if you wanted, you couldn't have an in-person interview. How were you able to navigate that? And did you make any mistakes, or was there any, things that you might have done differently at that time?
Well, I think what we did is it just more formalized the interview process. In other words, even now, like, we don't do in-person interviews, partly because people can be all over the country. So we just have a very formal interview process, but it's consistent and there's usually 3 or 4 steps to it. So we make sure that we have those times to communicate with people on a regular basis, have longer conversations, and try to make sure that somebody understands if they're a fit or not, and we have to understand if we're a fit for them or not.
Yeah, definitely. That's a mature way to look at it, rather than being like, this is what it is, and come see who we are. Can you tell me a little bit about, and this is actually not in my notes, but I was curious because I spoke to a Canadian business owner earlier in the month, and so you've been running a business in Canada for quite a while. I was told and under the impression that it isn't super easy, or wasn't super easy, to be a business owner in Canada. Was that the case, or just wondering what that has been like?
What was their experience like? What did they share as being challenging being in
Well,
Canada?
so the what ended up actually being said was that now, based on the political climate or whatnot, a lot of tech people who had moved to the Silicon Valley or to the United States are coming back to Canada to start tech businesses because it's more feasible. That's so. In my mind, I'm like, okay, then it must have been harder before. I'm not sure if what your experience has been about running a business in Canada.
I mean, there's probably the allure of Silicon Valley. In other words, like being in a city in Canada versus being in San Francisco. If you're going the startup route, 100%, that makes the most sense to me.
Sure.
But I never was going in that direction. We were never aiming to kind of grow a company to sell it or become a unicorn or any of those things. So I never encountered those challenges. Interestingly, for me, the challenges are different in that we're based here in Canada, but 75% of our work is in the United States. So as a result, we don't have a lot of local market. We have a lot of around North America clients. So we have clients all over North America. So we just chose to be a different kind of company. So we never, like, I think as I'm thinking it through from that question you asked, if we never aspire to work in Silicon Valley and we never aspire to work locally, then we're probably running a different kind of company than most people choose to found.
Got you. Good. Well, so I mean, that transitions into it. Why entrepreneurship? You very well could have, just went the design route and just what maybe how did you meet your business partner? Like what was that initial thought process of let's start a business in
So I think it was
1998?
arrogance more than anything up front. I was in my late 20s. Plank was started with two other partners. One of them didn't work out early on. The other one was with us for 5 years, and then she moved on. And then I inherited running it myself. And then at a certain point, about a decade ago, our first employee, his name is Steve Bissonette, who was clear that he was running the company with me. So he became a partner. So we're now partners running it together. So I can say it was arrogance. I didn't know what I was doing. It took me easily 5 years to fully own the idea of running a company and it not just be a hot potato we kind of threw back and forth between each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did, then I became passionate about Plank being that project that I'm working on, almost that creative object that I'm working on. And I never really thought about entrepreneurship, and I never thought that I was going to go this route until I thought about it afterwards and realized my stepfather always ran businesses, some successful, some not. My grandfather ran a clothing factory. My uncle ran a candy company. So as a result, I actually had models around me without even realizing it that were inspiring me, even if I was never trying to be inspired to do this.
Yeah, it's just in your blood. You just have whatever you were going to build and turned into this. That's wonderful. All right, so I'm gonna ask you about the thing that everyone's talking about right now, and I really don't go out of my way to talk about it, but I feel like the last 3 episodes I recorded, everything's been about this thing, AI.
Okay,
How is
here we
AI
go.
affecting your business? I really honestly, like when I was doing my notes, I was like, can I get around talking about it? But I feel like in tech today, especially the people that I'm talking to, it's everywhere. How's it affected your business? And where do you think it's going? But let's start with how it's affecting your business now.
So it's an interesting one. I know people that are extremely fearful of AI, and I know people who have embraced it so much that they've kind of tried to build it into every aspect of their life. And then there are people who are really, really seriously concerned that it's going to destroy their company.
Mm-hmm.
I don't fall into any of those camps. I kind of see it in what I think is a measured way and maybe too measured. In other words, I'm not too extreme one way or the other. It's a tool that we use on a daily basis. Our developers use it, and they've said they're probably 25% more productive as a result of it. Not 100% more productive, but 25% more. From a business perspective, we use it to rely on for research and things like that. So I think it's really a great assistant. But as far as writing and imagery and marketing copy, I'm very resistant to using it for that because of how generic it could be. Unless somebody is a really, really great prompter that knows how to get original content out of an AI. I just find that most of the AI that I encounter online, you can pretty much tell most of the time that it's AI, that it's AI generated. So I want to make sure that what we're doing, because what we do is high-end, big, large web projects, we don't kind of ruin that side of our business by becoming so generic. If AI takes up 75% of the market and handles it and works with tools like Webflow and all the different platforms for building websites, and 75% of the internet, it goes in that direction, even if AI suddenly gets substantially better, I think there will always be a market for high-end, unique, quality work that somebody wants and can ensure that it is unique to themselves and nothing about it is generic.
Yeah. It's kind of, in my mind, with the way that you posed it about if 75% goes that route, in my mind, it's kind of like, Kindle came out from Amazon and people are still buying leather-bound books. What it comes down to is you can buy a $10 or 99-cent book on Amazon just as Kindle or whatever, or you can be a fan like I am for many books and just buy really hardcover books and spend obscene amounts of money. So that absolutely makes sense. Now, okay, so right now you said you're neither too excited or too resistant to it. Has that changed over the last? Were you more resistant before, or has that been a consistent thought since? Because I personally, and I say this every time too, I was not that I was anti-AI. It wasn't about AI. It was just like, this is another thing I need to learn that I didn't really know if I needed to go about it. So how was your initial thoughts on it?
I was always interested in it. I find myself still curious. I know a lot of people that I've spoken to are, let's say, around my age, which is not to say end of my career, but, second half of my career. A lot of people are kind of like, yet another thing to learn. And sometimes because they're like, God, I have to now dig into this. And I get that. But, I mean, the internet has been about evolution and technology growth the whole way along. I think if we ever chose to not embrace the technology that's coming in front of us and not think about how we can work with it, I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice.
Mhm. Yeah. And the beauty of AI is, at least from my experience, is like as it's getting better, it's getting easier to use. Whereas before, like you really had to think about prompts, and now you can just like say random stuff 3 or 4 times and get a few different things, copy and paste all of it, put it back in there, and be like, all right, make this not sound like shit, right?
Right.
So it's gotten a lot easier to use, but absolutely makes sense. All right, so again, I'm really digging into the culture that you built, just because I think, very honestly, it's what everyone longs for as an employee, and I think as leaders, it's what they long for to build. And it's not, again, it's not one to one. Can you just practical advice when you're talking about building a team today? Speak to the hiring managers that just don't seem to get it in terms of distributed teams, being remote. Um, what do you think is the first step to being able to build a culture that isn't just lip service, that isn't just this is what we're hoping to do? Big company, small company, whatever it is, when you're trying to build a culture, how would you do it all over again?
So I was talking with somebody earlier today, and they brought up a management style to me that resonated right away. But I recognize it's not for everybody. Most companies run from a very top-down structure where owner of the company makes directives and tells people where to go and kind of pushes everything through based on what they want to have happen. And it usually leads to a culture where it's top-down decision-making, do your work, get things done, and then that's what'll satisfy me. Versus what I was told today is that we are more of a servant-led management structure. And that is one where I am there to be of service to get my team to do the best work that they can. I might direct as far as like leading people or suggesting the direction that things should be going in, but my goal is to enable people to do the best work they can. And I think I'm a good leader if people feel that ability to do better work every single day.
That gets me excited, because servant leadership is my favorite term, because
Okay.
I feel like this was a few years ago. I was learning about agile software development, about Scrum, and there's a position called the Scrum Master, and
Yep.
they're supposed to be kind of like a project manager, but they don't really manage anything. They just make sure everyone's okay and there's no roadblocks. It's that simple. And when I've managed for the first time, that's how I approached it, where I was like, I'm just, because like if you, again, for when it comes to leadership, I do think the leader should know where you're going, but you don't have to tell them how to get there. If you have hired people, if you hired the right people, there's no need to be like, all right, first you're going to do this, then you're going to do, no, this is where we're going. This is how long we want it to take. What do I have to do to let you get there the best way you can? So I get really excited when I hear that, when I hear servant leadership. All right. So tell me this, what are you most proud of in this journey you had with Plank so far?
That's a big one. Proud. I think I'm proud that we're still here over 25 years later. That I think we are still holding the values that we still are living up to. But I think the one thing that I'm proudest of, that I think I learned a lesson, is on our 20th anniversary, we chose to hold a party. And we held a party where we invited everybody who ever worked at the company to come to that event. And I realized there that I had spent the first 20 years running Plank always looking back. And always looking back and going, oh, remember when we were doing this? Remember when we did that? You remember that great thing that we did? And then at that party, I'm looking out and I see the team that's currently working at Plank. And not to say they didn't enjoy themselves, but what happened 15 years ago did not matter to them at all. They weren't there for it. And I suddenly realized I was not of service to the people that were at the company at that moment. So from that moment onwards, I realized I had to look forwards and not look backwards. And the only way I could do that is by investing in the team that was currently sitting at the company.
Wow, that's powerful. And so I'm assuming 2019-ish that was?
2018.
2018. Okay. So, all right. Yeah, because you said big party, and I was like 2025. I'm sure it wasn't 2020, because
No,
that wasn't
no,
gonna happen.
no.
All right. And what's next for Plank? What is the next 25 years look like? What do you think y'all are doing next?
I don't know what the exact timing is, but I know that the next 25 years is about getting the next leadership team in place to replace me. That's what the next 25 years is there for. In other words, I don't want this company to be sold to somebody externally. I don't know if that would ever happen or not, but I think we have people on our team and leadership in place and growing leadership that could take over this place and continue to run it, living up to the values that we've set for the company itself. And there will come a point, again, I don't know what the timeline is exactly, where I will be like, okay, it's time for a next group of people to take it to the company to the next place it needs to get to.
Mm. That's going to be a fun journey. It's going to be a whole different kind of journey, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. So now the next part, kind of not exactly wrapping up, but we're like second to last step of wrapping up. This is called the FAQs, the frequently asked questions.
Okay.
And so I have a set that I usually go towards, but now what I'm starting to do is kind of trying to curate specific ones for you.
Yeah.
So just bear with me, and if the question's dumb, let me know. What is one digital product that you can't live without?
Probably my MacBook Pro. Maybe it's old school of me. I mean, I have multiple devices, but that is still the object that I spent my most time on. I like having a larger screen where I can kind of stretch out rather than having, a small little device. So that's still my day-to-day go-to.
Yeah, it's my favorite piece of technology ever purchased, as many times as I've had. Isn't it really funny that you are calling a laptop a large screen? Think about like back in the day. Now that's the largest that we think of.
Well, it is funny because it's sitting in front of me right now. So it's not just this screen, but because I'm at a desk,
Yeah.
there's another screen right over here. So it is more monitor than just the laptop.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay. So this one actually is fun. Favorite website from early days, from the early internet days, early 90s, mid 90s. Favorite website from back then.
So I think it might have been early 2000s, but there was a movement in the internet early on, and I appreciate it at the time because I was a designer. There was all these design inspiration websites, and there was one called k10k.net. And it was just a place where there was probably a community, let's say 10 or 20 designers on that site. They would just post interesting links all day long. And think of it almost like as Reddit now, where if you find a good subreddit, you're like, oh, there's great stuff in here.
Yeah.
It was just design focused, and the people who were submitting links into that community were people that I appreciated from a design perspective.
Real quick sidetrack. I feel like early 2000s had a lot of these websites for every different thing, and then Reddit came out and made it like consolidated. But I remember similar but different. But there was a website similar for like online video games or web video games where they would just put links in there for every different kind of game, and then you just go in there to play. But yeah, Reddit has.
What was it called?
I don't remember. And this is I think at that time I was like 7, and okay. I just never closed my computer. And at that time that was sacrilegious, but I would just have that one website on there. Yeah, this was a while ago. They might still have it. It was like 100fungames.com, something foolish.
Okay.
But yeah, a while ago. Let's see. All right. Ooh, most overrated design trend right now. What's getting overdone? Or one that you'd want to never see again?
I have a great answer to that. Maybe it's just, maybe it's just that the internet is generally starting to look way too much the same. In other words, obviously there's certain standards, but I would like to see more design originality and not a lot of sameness. And that's what I think the biggest design criticism I have right now is there's a real sameness in the internet. And part of it is that, maybe 50% of WordPress sites are using the same 5 templates. Could be something like that,
I absolutely agree. I was thinking, actually, it's funny you say that because I was thinking back to it. I was like, there used to be a lot more robust color back in the day. Now it's very much like because we have figured out icons and figured out like the way to just do hyperlinks, it's a bit different. But back then really, because even now, if you go to what I think of as like Nickelodeon.com, which used to be just a hodgepodge of craziness. It was madness.
Yeah.
It's very clean now, which is fine, but it's not fun anymore. All right. Let's see. Ooh, one word your team would use to describe you. And you can't ask them right now. You can ask them about it later, but
I'll ask them afterwards. I hope helpful, but maybe also at times annoying. That's probably another one.
Those are both, they go in hand. Let's be honest.
guess,
Like
yeah.
they go hand in hand, at least for good leadership. All right. Ooh, a myth about accessibility that you think needs busting.
The myth about accessibility needs busting is that if you check off all the checklist, something is automatically accessible. Not necessarily the case. In other words, you could use, like Google has a tool called Lighthouse, and you can get a 100% score on Lighthouse, and the website might not still render properly in a screen reader.
Solid. All right, wrapping these up, just a couple more. Best investment you ever made?
Best investment I ever made. I've told this story to a few people, but it was really given back in my face really, really well about 10 years ago. So we're going to go meet a possible client in North Carolina. I'm with somebody who'd been on my team for a good 5 years before that. And I made a joke about just how Plank was started because I had $10,000 sitting in the bank. And he was like, that's a pretty good $10,000 bet. And I'm like, I guess it is. So that would probably be the best investment, was taking the money I had in my account and being like, I think we can open up a studio and take on an office for 6 months.
Hell yeah. I mean, you make it sound so nonchalant, but like having the guts to do that, it takes effort. Because I'm always thinking about like rage quitting status quo and like starting something, but that leap is it's a pretty big leap.
It's an easier one too when you're 27 and you have no real responsibility. So you're just kind of like, well, the money's sitting in the bank. Well, I don't know. We can kind of do this. Let's just give it a try.
That's a great investment. So all right. So what is one thing, quote, message, word that you'd put on a billboard for millions of people to see?
About us, or just the word in general?
Anything you want. Any message you want to give to the world.
Kindness. That would be that's the word I'd use.
I love it.
Let's build a world around kindness.
What a beautiful world that would be. Last FAQ, favorite book or the book you gift the most?
Favorite book or book I gift the most? It's a really, really traditional one, but I'm really not a big fan of reading business books. But I remember the only or first business book I read that actually had an impact on me was called E-Myth. And that's one where it basically talks about, and the lesson it tries to get across is the difference between working on your business versus working in the business. As an owner, when you finally start working on and you're not working in the business, that's when you can start to take care and shape the company onto itself.
Wow, that distinction is huge, and I think most people don't think about it at all. But that's absolutely huge, and I will check out that book. And this is the only reason that last question is just for me, because I just want to collect books. All right, so where can people learn more about you and more about Plank?
2 places. Plank, you can find us at plank.co. That's our main website. But I will plug myself, I guess. I have wanted to take back ownership of my publishing from social media. So I've kind of reinvigorated WarrenWilansky.com, and I'm working there to kind of do some business-related thinking, but also share a lot of personal things. I have posts that go back 20, 30 years, like go beyond before the internet. Like I put up concert tickets, I go to baseball games, I go to different things, and I want it to be a place where I post about me and I post about what I'm passionate about. And that for me is a place that if you want to see not just the business side of what's on LinkedIn about me, that would be the place to do it.
And how long have you had that website going?
Oh God, I've had that website going really, really badly for over 20 years. I think it's going fine. It's not going great yet. It's going fine for about 3 or 4 months now.
3 or 4 months now. Okay, yeah. I'd love to hear about in a couple years, because taking ownership back from social media, I think, is something that we don't think about it, but it's something, because like I'm one of those people that delete Instagram for like 6, 7, 8, 9 months at a time, and then I'll come back to it because social media really eats at your attention span. Not, I love, if Instagram, if you're listening, you're wonderful. Keep me on the algorithm, please. But I totally get wanting to be on there, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. All right. So as we're wrapping up, Warren, what do you want to leave my listeners with as we sign off?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing I'll say is your listeners should continue to listen to this podcast. This is a really great discussion. I've enjoyed it. So hopefully, you can grow your podcast audience, and hopefully your audience can, recommend this podcast to other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So for everyone listening, thank you so much. This was a great discussion, and we will see you next time.